Patrick, are you ready for roll call?
All right, Aleppo, Avalon, Glen Avon,
Here.
Bell Acres, Bellevue,
Here.
Edgeworth,
Here.
Emsworth, Swiftly Heights,
Here.
Glenfield, Batesville,
Here.
Buck,
Here.
Leetsdale,
Present.
Swiftly.
Here.
Which one?
All right, so next up, public comment.
Glenn Osborne is also present here.
Mark it down.
Thank you.
Public comment, anyone on the Zoom have a public comment or anything that's not on the agenda?
Nope.
Anything you want to report? We'll give some time. Okay, next is on the motions regarding the minutes, income statement, balance sheet, budget to actual bill payments. Yeah, do you have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Thanks, Paul.
Second.
Okay, Jeff. Patrick, do you mind giving some maybe highlights of, it's all in the packet, right?
Yep. So hopefully everything came across pretty quickly with the PDF packet I sent out. Just one note, I did revise a few of the formatting sections of the financial reports. I do want to note that in the deposits, you're going to see Michael Baker International. There's a substantial check, $16,000 that's been put towards our Route 65 study. So sort of like a pass through from what was explained to me from that, Michael Baker gets this funding through PennDOT, and then they pass it on to us to pay for this project. So no COG dollars are being spent. It's just sort of to pass through the funds through the grant process there. Just a couple of things you might have noticed, the office supplies are a bit over budget. I'm not sure, I wasn't privy to the discussions last year, but we did purchase a new laptop here and just one of those things that the percentages are a bit over. So if you
What
guys,
category is this under?
the office supplies.
Okay,
I just maybe thought that someone might observe that. So the couple of things we did buy didn't have before. But if you guys have any questions on that, I'd be happy to answer them. Archwell.
I've got one suggestion to make on the packet, and I don't know how difficult that's gonna be, but if we could have the packet page numbers, so if you look on page
Yeah.
X, I think it's page 6, you've got all the list, again, good stuff, we'll manage, but
Yeah, thank you for the comment.
Okay.
Any other feedback on how it was presented and how you guys got it? This is new. I know it's a little different than we were doing before. I just thought it was more traditional for like a typical board packet and a little easier for me to produce as well, to be honest.
we think,
I do too. It's easier.
are we gonna make this available online? Like
It is,
to the public?
Yeah, so the packet, I had an announcement on the website that we have to pull up for reference to. Just as the agenda, the meeting packet, the Zoom link, so everything's accessible if anyone wants to participate or observe, and that'll be there in perpetuity.
Awesome. Okay, any questions? Any question online? Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Abstain.
Abstain. Okay. Motion's approved. Next is my report. Nothing special to report. I'm happy that we're together finally. It's been a long year. I think we did pretty good in the circumstances. We did pretty good on Zoom, but it's always better to see you guys face to face. Yeah, that's all I got. I think all the other items that I'm like pushing through are in the new business and old business with chat.
All right, for the executive director's report, I just want to note that I distributed this to all the secretaries and managers. Hopefully we can have these placed in each one of the packets for municipalities and just keep everyone up to date, see what's going on in the COG. I don't want to go too far into details here because we are going to talk about this in new business and old business, but just to note the CD47 grant awards were sent out and awarded. That process is beginning here. 2 projects in Bellevue, one in Leetsdale, one in Leet Township. I would note there was a project ordered in Avalon, but it was tabled and the funding was withdrawn just because it was an emergency repair that was done in Avalon in the spring. So they couldn't wait for that funding with that situation. The CD year 48, so next year's round of grant funding, the pre-application process is going to be starting within the next week or two. And that deadline is going to be in September, it looks like, according to the county. Everything's sort of in flux right now, nothing's set in stone. But I definitely want to meet with everyone's engineers and staff to make sure that we get as many applications on the books as possible. I want to get everyone involved in this, even if it's, you know, a smaller ADA project. I just want to get something on paper. So if it's unaware this year, we get it next year and just build a cycle for all of our members to get everyone involved. Tomorrow, we're going to have our bid opening for our waste and recycling contract. So one was dropped out this morning. We're expecting the second one tomorrow morning at some point, 11 a.m. The meeting is going to be broadcast on Zoom. It will be in person, but those who want to participate are welcome to do so. You can find that information on our website. Yeah, and that's pretty much all the highlights from it. We'll get into some more detail with these other items and new business.
Hey, Patrick, how many contractors do we currently have for this?
So yeah, we had a pre-bid meeting that was mandatory. We had 2 companies show up. We sent out the specifications to 4 total. We were hoping for at least 3, but I spoke with Michelle Nestor, who helped write these specifications. She highlighted that one of the haulers in particular, she's saying that their capacity is just not there with staffing. It's really hard to get drivers right now. And to be honest with you, it's better to find that out now than have them bid, win, get awarded, then figure out they can't have, you know, our 11 towns in its contract labor. So we have 2 right now, Waste Management and Noble Environment. It's county hauling because they're all other areas, but so I'm not really sure why they have so many names, but.
So on CDBG, I just wanted to make the board aware that the county requested that I be more involved at the beginning during this transition. So participate in meetings every Monday with Patrick, but it's going super well. They're happy. I mean, we're doing continuation of the methodology, but Patrick is doing great, getting up to speed very quickly on what's happening. So it's all good.
Just for the record, I can't thank Janet enough. She's been such a big help during this whole process. Just comes, 4 or 5 hours a week to get me up to speed. And there's a lot to get up to speed on this process. Had no idea the world of CDBG was so vast, but yeah, I think we're getting to the point where we're almost ready to go. But yeah, it's been a process.
It's like the dark hole.
Yeah, it really is. A lot of nuance to it.
New business.
So first up, I would invite, we have 2 guests, Stephen and Ray. Stephen Quick, Ray Gastel from Carnegie Mellon. They've been working on that Route 65 corridor study. This is a subset of that study. It's the LINK project, and it's dealing with our first 5 member communities here. So I will let them share the screen here, let them take it away. They're gonna have a brief 5-10 minute presentation just updating on that study. And we'll take a look. So Stephen, Ray, I'm going to share my screen or let you share it, I mean. So feel free.
Okay, let's see. I'm going to try again, see what I got there.
So you should be good to go.
Are you seeing my screen at all yet? Yes or no?
No.
All right, let's try. Never give up. Let's try again. Here we go. I think it's going to work out this time. Let's see. There we go. Excellent. And then we'll do a slideshow.
Got it. Thanks.
Yeah, great. All right. Well, good evening, everyone. I know we've got to get through some material quickly, but as Patrick introduced it, this is sort of in part of a larger project we've been doing in this area. And some of you are very familiar with the Route 65 work. And so we're going to focus. But one of the things that happened is we looked at this, and this is all with the kind of the support of a research center at Carnegie Mellon, which is sort of Traffic 21 and also known as Mobility 21, which has both public and private funds to look into research about the changing nature of transportation and mobility, and really applied research ultimately, because it's meant to look forward to kind of deployment and where this research takes us. So that's why I've been looking at Route 65 with many of you, like really trying to understand what's the future for Route 65 and what's the kind of how it could work better with communities. And then, but we noticed in this work that there was really this question of like, well, a larger question about all the kind of talk that's happening right now about something that is sometimes called local mobility. And let me just go to the next slide. And sort of local mobility, meaning that it's not just about the long commutes, it's not just about the 65s and the corridors, it's also about kind of main streets that connect communities and that often provide an awful lot of services as well. And and the question is not just about kind of there's first mile and last mile, which you might want to get to that main street in order to take a bus for a longer trip, but it's also just the trip to get there in the first place, whether it's for school or for work or for the orthodontist or so many other things that actually happen along this. And what's interesting about the communities here, about Bellevue, Avalon, Medallion, Emsworth, and Killbuck too, which touches it as well, you have a shared main street. It has about 4 names, as you know, but it's actually one continuous street, and it's one that actually in many ways could be looked at as an opportunity for different types of mobility. And so this is just looking at the map. I think you know your community is far better than I do. This you can sort of see how you can see that pattern of where 65 runs in the south, and then but this other one, is even though it changes from Church to Center to and then over to California and Lincoln, it still it basically consists of Main Street with a lot of the kind of downtowns or kind of neighborhood centers characteristic of main streets, and also it's much more level than most other conditions in kind of Pittsburgh region community. The next area. This is when I talk about local mobility. You can see here, just look at these icons. It's really, the cars are part of it, but it's also all these other types of things: bikes, scooters, e-scooters, ride shares, walking, of course. I mean, skateboards, and even the future of delivery robots, which are already kind of in the streets in the region. Now, a lot of the kind of work being done in this region and around the country assumes that a lot of these things are really just for the center city. And maybe in the short term that's true, but in the longer term, we think that it's pretty clear that more of these services are going to be part of the way that life is lived out in places like these communities that we're talking about. And also, it already is. I mean, wheelchairs are already part of of how people use our streets, as is walking. These are communities that still have children walking to school, for example. And of course, there's bus service. So it's really this improved local mobility idea. And again, we're testing ideas here. And what we're going to show you, these are just idea generators, really. We're trying to sort of say, like, these are, we've interviewed some folks in the community, and we're going to continue to do some of that. And we're also just looking at how these ideas might or might not even be, work conceptually. So again, as I say, this is just, you can see the residential is largely yellow. The commercial and all other services are in red. Schools, you can not see that well in this image, but are in blue. And so it's like, because one of the things interesting here is these not just neighborhood centers in and of themselves, but they also serve a longer piece of, there's also this long main street with all sorts of different activities along it, which is also used by people for their daily needs. So one way to look at this is a term called walkshed, which just means, it's just a way of saying that how far can you walk in 5 minutes from a kind of a neighborhood center, and that walking, it could also refer to biking, it'd be all kinds of things. Just that shed term, that's all it's being used for. And so the main street becomes a kind of place with multiple uses, and also the whole thing is less than 4 miles long. And then also, what's interesting when you look at this, at these images, is that almost every house, almost every residential area is actually within a 5-minute walkshed of some kind of neighborhood center in this area along these 5 communities. I mean, Killbuck is a little bit of an exception because it has a much less dense pattern, but the other ones are in that kind of pattern. So as I said, we're sort of just this point, we're really like learning from folks, also generating some ideas, testing with drawings, because we come from a kind of architecture. We're in the, Steve and I are housed in the School of Architecture at the Remaking Cities Institute. And so we're working with some students and so forth to develop some ideas. And Steve's going to take it from here and go forward. But Steve will tell me to advance the slides.
Okay. Well, we're using locations in the various neighborhoods along the main street to test out what would happen if we were to use the existing sidewalk. What if we were to enlarge the sidewalk? What if we were to think about streets differently? And also, how about adding lanes to the roadway itself? So we've called them different terms. Sidewalk plus means that we are really beginning to think of the sidewalk as having a little bit more activity on it and widening it. The bikeway plus, we've given them all plus names just to make it sound that it would involve some change. But bikeway plus is actually putting a bicycle lane on the streets itself rather than the sharrows that you now have between the communities. Sharrows are a combined bicycle and car. But as Ray had explained, micromobility and local transportation is going to start involving a lot different kind of vehicles. We're seeing them now in cities. We're seeing a lot more electric wheelchairs actually on the streets. We're seeing electric bikes, we're seeing scooters, and so on. And as they work their way out of cities and into the first ring and second ring around the center, we expect that, and the reason we're studying these, your smaller communities, is to see what the impact would be on them. So we test them with actual conditions. So I'm going to show you a few examples. Ray, if you could advance on. These are the locations that we're looking at. We have one in Bellevue, which has already done quite a really nice improvement of extending the sidewalk and beginning to use the sidewalk for more than just a narrow strip. But we looked at two in Avalon, one where the commercial area is on the south side, but also a location where there's the larger apartment buildings. And then in Ben Avon, in the small commercial area there, and then right in Emsworth around the City Hall. Here's a Bellevue example, and let me explain these drawings. We do have drawings of existing conditions, and we've plotted them in plan view. So give you an example, on the left-hand side is a plan view of the main street in the major center portion of Bellevue. The white here are the parking lanes. The gray is right next to that is the darker gray is what we call the planting zone, or it's a zone where furniture, street lamps, light poles, and so on are located in the sidewalk itself. And finally, the building edge. The buildings in the drawings you're going to see later are a little bit lighter, so the street and the sidewalk show up a little bit better. And the black is the cart, what we call the cartway. So this is the existing condition in Bellevue, where the bump outs have been done at the intersections and the crosswalks accentuated, and a pavers put into that, what may have been at one time a planting bed in that center area. And then on the right-hand side is a section cut through the street, and that's what that little backwards C thing is in the middle of the drawing. But we just take a slice through the three-dimensional slice so we can see how high the buildings are and the relationship of the building heights and the sidewalk widths and the street widths to the buildings. And as you can see, the buildings are built right up to the edge of the sidewalk. Sidewalks are 7 feet wide on both sides. There's a 4-foot section between the sidewalk and the curb right now, and then you have the parking lanes and 2 travel lanes. Ray, if you could advance.
This one here. I think there's a little bit of a glitch here in our presentation. I apologize. If you give me, we seem to have gotten, after all sorts of prep to make sure nothing like this happened, I don't seem to have quite the right presentation. So if you just give me a moment, I'm going to take care of that. All right. All right. Let's see. Okay, let's get out of that one. And
Hey, Steve, is the report getting published, or are you still working on?
Oh, we're still, yes, John Sebastian, we're still working on it. We're submitting a draft initial report at the end of this month, and then we will follow it up with a final report at the end of August. So we're in the latter stages right now. So, our contract is really through the end of August. And this will be published as part of research. it's the only one that's going on in the Pittsburgh area right now. And looking at this micromobility and local transportation and effects it might have. And as Ray explained, these are kind of tests to see how things might work and might not work. So we're reporting back on what we think would work and what doesn't work and where we see problems of these going forward. And that they're not meant to provide real solutions necessarily, but ideas that can be discussed and whether or not communities in the end may want to have policies about micromobility, because as we're seeing in the center cities, there's a lot of new shared devices, scooters and bicycles and so on. And at some point, they're going to make their way into the suburb areas.
I think we're good.
I think we're good.
Hold
If you could
on.
go to slide 10, Ray.
Mhm. There we go. Well, here's the Avalon existing conditions. We showed you the Bellevue one, which is actually a very rich one that was that you've done a lot of work on. The community's done a lot of work on. But here's the Avalon one, and we can go from here.
Sure. And this is the buildings on the bottom of the plan view on the left are the commercial strip there. And there's parking on both sides of the street as it exists right now. And the section is a little bit different than Bellevue. Some of these buildings on the north side of this, which would probably be the east side for most of you, it's the buildings are set back further and they're more residential. So, Ray? So when we're looking at bikes, the bike proposal is actually taking one of the parking lanes and turning it into a two-way travel lane for micromobility devices. And you can see that in the section on the right-hand side where you see two bicyclists side by side on the right-hand side of the street. This is meant to probably the need for bicycles and some of these micromobility devices, they have small wheels. They need a much more level surface than our sidewalks can provide. So this is one solution of actually taking a parking lane on one side of the street. The blue lines that you see coming in from the three side streets, those would be marked from houses to get up to Main Street or down to Main Street as it may be. And we're showing them always on the right-hand side because in Pennsylvania, cars going uphill have the right of way over cars coming downhill. And since you've got rising slopes on both sides of Main Street, it would be in that area. But this would still allow parking on both sides of the side streets, and cars would drive in the middle. It's just and the only reason for showing them as a painted surface here, then they could be a line rather than a painted surface, is to warn drivers of cars that there are other vehicles on the roadway. And so therefore, this is really a shared side street condition, whereas when we get onto the Main Street, taking one of the parking lanes would allow for a 7-foot width, and therefore you could get bicycles side by side and directions in both ways. So they meet really at the intersections. And that becomes the location where it becomes, for us as designers, it's a more critical situation and a more safety situation. Hey, Ray, can you go on to the next one?
So, good question. So what's the impact, I get what you're doing, but what's the impact of parking when you're cutting parking in half in a business district? What do your studies show for that? You get it for vacuum is great, but the issue is going to be you're taking half the parking away from a business district.
Yeah, we understand that. And we are plotting the parking locations, but we don't have solutions for parking. In some cases, there are parking lots that have been set aside either on Main Street or right around the corner and accessible. We know that this is an impact, and we know that it's going to be an issue probably much more felt in your communities, suburban communities, than they would be in the center city situation. And we're noting that condition. We have in some cases, crossing as we do in some of the neighborhoods in Pittsburgh, where you cross a sidewalk with a car to get into a parking lot, those can be pretty dangerous. And we know that. So we're looking to hopefully, if there were to be parking added, it would be added behind the frontage on the main streets. This is expanding the sidewalk, and this is showing Avalon on the other side of the street where we've expanded the sidewalk out into the parking lane. And on the left-hand side, it's a little bit different than what you see in the middle on this plan view. On the left-hand side, the micro-mobility vehicles, which might be wheelchairs, they may be scooters, could be bicycles, would be traveling on the sidewalk level. The green is the current planting strip, and then the sidewalk itself is right next to where the property lines are. So this planting strip serves as a buffer between these sort of motorized vehicles, and they're slow-moving vehicles. They don't go over 12 or 16 miles an hour. But they would be on the sidewalk level, and then they drop down to go across the streets and then come back up. When it comes to the really heavily used areas, such as your commercial or your neighborhood centers, we would expect that bicyclists, and some of them would use the regular street rather than the upper level, because we know that as we've seen during the pandemic, you're starting to use your sidewalks for other than just walking uses, and you're starting to put tables out there, and we would expect to see more of that in the future. So there would be a split that would take place on this kind of a situation. And we know that we don't want motorized vehicles running on the normal sidewalk. But on the other hand, by widening the sidewalk, it does give all of your merchants more space to really take a lot of the activities out onto the street and make it even more of a town center.
Hey, Steve, before you move on this particular design here, have you guys considered to address maybe what Rick was talking about, maybe sacrificing the side of the road where you don't have the sidewalk, but all the pedestrian cyclists are, enlarged on the one side? Is that something that is possible?
That's possible. It just depends on whether you want to give up parking. We left the parking in on this version, which is in the white on the north side of the street here. And maybe, is that answering your questions on Sebastian?
You remove the pedestrian on the right, you move the white into where the pedestrian used to be, but you also add it on the other side, just because you've kind of focused everything on the left side. So you do have two lanes of parking, one on each side, but everything is now focused on pedestrian and multimodality on the left side. Anyway, maybe it's just,
yeah, on this version with it's all sidewalk, it would give up on one side of Main Street for most of its length, a lane of parking.
okay.
Well, Steve, why don't you continue?
Okay.
Hold on. Should we move on to the next slide, which is really just sort of this survey? Because one of the things that we're to think about is like whether the system as it is today works. I mean, whether the sharrows work, whether there is a mixed type of vehicles, whether there is a kind of full range of local mobility, or whether that's all of that has to be weighed against these really critical issues of parking and so forth, like the ones that were brought up. But we're sort of testing that, and this is how the survey was meant to be, kind of getting people's response about whether there was stuff they're concerned about today.
Yeah, this was posted. Susan Hockenberry had posted this several months ago. We've received a few responses back, but not as many as we had hoped. We're probably going to do some phoning coming up after probably once we get into August to talk a little bit further about some of these.
The next slide.
Ray, do you want to take this?
Well, I just said that we're working now to kind of where these are sort of tests that we've been developed, and bringing them in front of you. And as Steve said, we're going to be coming back and spending more time with folks on these, but with the survey probably is an important next step, so that we can kind of inform these a little bit more that way. We are going to have a sort of bare bone kind of just sort of update sort of report kind of by the end of the month, but the fully fleshed out report will come later. And that's But meanwhile, we're completing the survey, kind of get this dialogue on the priorities complete. And then we'll have a fuller report in the fall. And I think that what we're really trying to get at here is like that even from what John Sebastian just said, I mean, we're going to sort of make sure that the tests that we're doing and the kind of, just these are sort of idea generators really, because that's really the point. It's like put some things out there and people say, well, that's fine, but it really doesn't do this, or that's fine, but it really is, the cost is just too high. And but at the same time, if you never look at these things, we never get to test about whether there's going to be how this would really, the stuff which again, people think of as just being sort of center city, but there's there's a lot of changes in mobility that everywhere is going to have, not just AV, but, all kinds of, not just autonomous vehicles, but all kinds of other things, ride share, things have already changed. And I know that they've already changed here. So that's what we're going to be, that's how we move forward. And it's been really good and important that we're able to work with Susan and with the COG up to, with the staff on the COG and some of the folks that we surveyed. And we want to take this forward. So thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Any questions before?
Yeah, we're at the point where we're spending tens of thousands of dollars on this now.
Who's we?
The COG.
On this, you're spending, there's monies for this which come from federal support and so forth. There's was some in-kind work by Susan and maybe some that was for this, but there's not thousands of dollars being spent on this, as I understand it.
What's the goal of this project? What are we getting out of this?
Well, the goal of the project is twofold. It's like, one is there's a larger research goal, which is like, will all this kind of new local mobility discussion, how does it work in communities in the region beyond the center city? And so just learning about that, like this meeting right now is learning about that. And that's just being able to say, if this is ever going to happen, or if it's important, or if it's a priority, how would it happen? And to get sort of all kinds of information and a way of looking at it. Ultimately, it's meant to be something that if some of these kind of ideas get some legs with the communities, it's like to work to try and actually maybe test some of them. And that's that's another phase of work, really getting into the applied side of this. But first, we need to get to this kind of, we have to work at a conceptual level in some ways to get started.
All of the funding for this study is provided through the university. It's really been for conducting the survey. So there's been no expenditure other than some advisory time that Susan has spent during the course of this.
The grant was applied for through the COG.
No, the COG has been an advisor on this project. The Remaking Cities Institute at Carnegie Mellon applied for the funding for this project.
Why did we have a meeting where we voted to apply for funding for this?
There's another study, 65. This is not 65.
Yeah, that is another, that's distinct from this. Yeah, this is a separate kind of, this is more of a research project with the university.
Okay, thank you, guys.
Thanks, guys. And can we expect this PowerPoint to be sent out? If you want to send it to me, I can distribute it if possible.
Yeah, absolutely. We can distribute this, and we can also, as I said, as Steve said, we're going to make sure we're doing some phoning to do that, get that survey worked on, and we'll also work with Patrick on like if there's folks who want to go into a little more depth on some of this stuff, we can set up a meeting to do that work as well. Because we, listen, we recognize we've worked in this realm for a while. We know that there's challenges here. Same time, we really believe in testing and kind of learning with you guys about what might work and what might matter to you all.
We had also prepared a one-page description of the project that was distributed to all of the local government entities, your town managers, and your council people and supervisors. We could also include that with this here, which will help to explain it a little further.
And one thing, getting to know Stephen and Ray, I recommended just to briefly wrap up is, as they sort of finalize this little section of their project, they visit you guys individually, and that way, the other 4, 5, 6, 7, however many council members you guys have, have an opportunity to ask those questions because you guys know your communities better than anyone. So the impacts of these concepts are going to be best discovered and understood by, visiting each one of those 5 towns to sort of hammer those out. So.
So one quick comment, I was trying to type, just to factor in, this is Rick Wagner from Ben Abbott. One thing we've been seeing is a lot more of the children and young teens on electric scooters. Not exactly, but that is giving them a lot more exposure going from town to town for work, as well as visiting businesses, just hanging out. That is not something I thought of initially when we initially started this, but we've seen a big trend in that. That's again, not from an interesting trend of giving more mobility to groups that really never had that kind of, maybe on bikes, but they're going further than they would have on bikes, on the scooters and things. So it's an interesting factor.
That's a good point. We started this study with asking the question, how could people get to Main Street who do not own cars or cannot drive a car? And how would we go from there? Because the idea was to make it equitable for everybody in these communities to be able to get to Main Street and to use the services locally. And I think you're bringing up a very good point. I think in the long run, there is real value in beginning to think about the centers of each of your communities as shared. Because I think what we've seen here is that one community may have a certain type of service and another doesn't. And so therefore, just to make them accessible to everybody in the long run is one of the virtues of having perhaps a different way of getting around than you have in the past.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, I have more questions.
Oh, okay.
So when we had the presentation by the contracting company or the engineering firm, they talked about narrowing the lanes on Route 65 and that being a big part of this project to slow
What
traffic.
project what do you mean project?
The 65 corridor project.
Study? You have to be careful here. We're not, this is like, those guys are studying what could be and the impact, and this is part of a research study. This is not a project that we are pushing forward.
When I say project, I'm talking about the 65 corridor project because we've been calling it 65 corridor project for 2 years.
No,
Yeah, this is separate.
totally separate. We'll talk about this till but I don't think that right now is the time. Okay.
Thanks, guys.
All right. Well, thanks for having us on the agenda this evening. We really appreciate it. And see you soon.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Cool. Tony, do you mind if we talk about, I'm going to leave it on the agenda.
Sure, but
I
they
know you've
have
got a-
been, Steve Quick from Rebuilding Cities Institute has been at several 65 corridor project meetings and spoken at them and presented what they're doing as part of the 65 corridor project.
Right, that's true.
And I feel like every time I bring concerns to the COG, we want to not talk about it.
Your concerns is that we spend municipal money on this study, which is not the case. We did apply for grants for the COG, and we received the money from PennDOT, and we spent it in different ways. Some of them part were from Michael Baker, the contractor that you're talking about. They received money, and we happened to be the location where they applied the analysis, right?
Okay.
So you're upset about the fact that we're receiving federal money or state
Well,
money.
we just presented the bump outs in Bellevue as an example of a success for this research. The putting bump outs in Bellevue were a horrible idea, and they were done to financially inflate a project, and they're a disaster.
Is this
so-
connected to the study though?
We just mentioned it in this presentation. We put a slide up with Bellevue, and we talked about the bump out curves.
But we're gonna discuss about your opinion about the success of what happened there to the study. I don't think it's appropriate to talk about this, right? It's disconnected.
It's not
to-
appropriate to talk about something that was just presented in their presentation.
Yeah,
Well,
it
there's
is.
two separate
Yeah.
functions here. One is the Main Street and one is 65. The Main Street, the Lake Project, is a totally separate function run by the universities. The grant came from them. The 65 was funded through state and federal.
I mean, I see what you mean, but it was part of this presentation.
Okay, yeah, but Bellevue approved the bump outs. I mean, you got,
Bellevue Council fought against the bump outs. That was overridden by a BADC committee that was extraneous to council. And I've poured through over 1,000 pages of CBDG documents, and I've had to read these emails that stretch back to 2010. And organizations like Bigger with Kathy Pilger and the COG have been overriding the decisions of council in Bellevue for 10 years. And I've been hearing this, that Bellevue Council is, not the COG's problem, and the COG can't help what Bellevue does. But this past week, so, that's what I heard from John Sebastian a year ago. So I said, that's reasonable. So I spent the whole last year
Just to
trying
be
to
clear, what did I say a year ago?
when I brought my concerns about the streetscape project, which part of it was just presented in this presentation. What I was told by you and Susan was that you can't influence what designers we have or what Bellevue. Okay, so
I stick by this.
so I spent and that's reasonable. I understand you, but I spent the last year trying to convince my council that we need to get a new designer.
Okay.
I've had a lot of very stressful meetings with Brad Hazelwood, who stated in several meetings, he's gonna keep applying for grants as long as they keep giving them, which is not caring that what he just said was illegal. And it's been a process. And we were finally at the point where we were gonna hire a new designer.
Sorry, but a point of order, this is a Bellevue problem, not a COG problem. Sounds
The
like you're
COG
having a struggle with your.
And I was on vacation this past week. The COG had a meeting with my managers and said that if they don't vote for this, that if they switch designers, that they will never get CDBG funding again.
I just want to clarify a point. I don't want to get lost in the weeds here because we do have a pretty long agenda, but he's referring to, I'm doing my round of staff visits here and I met with Cindy. It wasn't about CDBG, it was about everything that we can talk about as staff to COG. And that I met separately, Mr. Tulio, as he requested. We talked for about 45 minutes about Bellevue and the history of the COG. I thought it was a pretty productive meeting. I look forward to continuing to build on that, but as he references, the county and the COG and staff of Bellevue met over Zoom. And the county just wanted to get some clarification and status of the project. And they basically told us the federal auditors and people that are much higher than them are asking questions on why this money has been spent in 3 or 4 years. And if Bellevue doesn't spend the money, money's gonna get spent elsewhere.
That's exactly what we're not
The
making the
same
rule
thing
that
was
we
said in
don't.
2017, before I was on council. Bellevue Council was gonna hire a new designer. And Susan Hockenberry came to council and said, if you don't hire a designer now, you lose the funding.
So, okay, let's just.
So
make
every
something
time
clear.
every time Bellevue Council is going to hire a new designer, because this project's a nightmare, it's $1.5 million over budget, and it's 8 years past schedule. Suddenly, there's this 2-week deadline that the COG comes in.
Okay. Tony, Patrick and I are gonna attend your board meeting, is it next week? In person to address this, so it's not like we're dodging anything. Anybody here is welcome, of course, to attend this. I don't think this is like, I think we're going in circles a little bit right now. So let's move on. We're gonna talk about this at your meeting. You reserve time. It's gonna be a public meeting where we're gonna make those statements and then you can voice everything. And then I think your board will be very interested about this. So let's move on. What's next one?
Yeah, real quick. I'd made two is just the establishment of future meeting locations. And I just want to kind of carry this on and visit other towns and get to let you guys host these meetings. Just to get to see what else is out there and then get to experience a little bit of the COG. So I don't know if we're going to have the ability to set locations today, but if you guys wanted to make a motion, we can set that up and then I can relay the different locations and dates and then advertise that in a citizen or paper record for the remaining 5 years.
Should we vote next week, next month until we have that list?
Well, do we want to set something for August then, at the very least?
We just let Patrick, whoever wants to volunteer, let him set the schedule. I mean,
Yeah,
that's something. You can fit Emsworth in wherever you want.
Perfect.
For this size and
Put
group.
Edgeworth in wherever you
yeah.
But,
come up,
But not August, because
It's a little hot there.
Okay, Casey report.
Yeah, I'll work with you guys in the coming days to fix that up and make it final, and then we'll go ahead and advertise it.
Yeah, I don't think anybody can have those.
Clear the
We
cap.
can
That's all I got.
put it on for two.
Awesome.
Perfect.
Yeah, you got your spots.
Do you guys want to make a quick motion?
Make a motion to allow Patrick to advertise the meeting schedule for the remainder of 21. Second.
Thank you.
I'll just have to double check if you want to send me a date.
Yeah.
I'll just double check that the room's available.
Perfect. I
Let's see how
appreciate it.
to approve the motion.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Okay,
Thank you. Another thing I wanted to bring up, and this isn't to finalize anything, but just to sort of get us thinking in this direction. PRC and the COG have worked together to establish 7 traveling glass bin events over this summer. They're going to be going all the way, I believe, until October. So, I think it's a really nice thing, but I want to get something more permanent for our members, right? Recycling is all about routine. You can't have someone waking up one day and say, well, I was in Swiftly that week, now it's in Bellevue, and now it's going to be at the high school in Quaker Valley. Too much going on there. It's way too much noise, right? So I was able to get a quote for PRC. We did something similar in South Strabane where we had one stationary dumpster, right? 20 yards, holds between 6 and 8 tons of glass. We did see it used quite a bit. We were averaging 2 pulls a month. I wouldn't expect anything less with 15 towns, and maybe we even go from 1 to 2, but let's just start with 1 here, right? So we did get a quote. It's $1,000 down for the first delivery and all the PRC fees, including advertisement, and it's basically their cut of it. And they get these dumpsters through Cap Class. They raise the funds to procure these really big, expensive dumpsters. And then each pull after that is $400. A couple ideas that we used in South Strabane was cost sharing. So East Washington Borough and South Strabane split the cost based on population. It was $300 when we started back then. It was like $70 for East Washington, $230 for South Strabane. We could come up with something similar based on population. I would just basically invoice each town once a month based on how many pools we have. And that way everyone has access to that site. Some of the things we need to work out is where that would be. Obviously,
maintenance of the site.
maintenance of the site, security, things like that, to make sure people aren't doing what they don't are not supposed to do. One thing I observed with class, and one thing I talked with John and Alan about in Edgeworth, is people that do this do it pretty well. It's actually pretty shocking. Recycling is a messy job, and a lot of times people don't do it right, but for whatever the reason, people recycle glass the right way. I observed it. PRC attests to it too. Very little contamination. People seem to follow the rules pretty well. But anytime you have a site with a dumpster, you just have to be careful and do your due diligence.
So Patrick, is it the case that we need to have a proposal put together with probably some financials and where? And that obviously the location will come after a lot of discussions with a lot of people.
Yeah.
I know we've talked about Killbuck and the Walmart area close to Emsworth. Again, I think it's worth continuing this discussion and build a proposal that we can present in a few months.
Yeah.
Did you have something else in mind, or?
How successful was it?
Oh, the PRC?
Yeah,
Yeah, good
last.
What do you say how successful was? Like my experience working with this before? So in South Strabane, like I said, it was a home run.
Yeah, but how about here? I mean, what kind of participation are we getting?
So we only have data from our first event. That was at Killbuck. We got a little over 1.5 tons of glass. So that was about 40% full. Again, it's just one of those things where I'm interested to see how Aleppo went. I was actually visiting Aleppo Township that week, and the dumpster was there. People were really happy. Try to advertise it on Facebook pages. But again, you're never going to get the value out of these pop-up events that you will
I
in
agree.
stationary. You're never going to get it filled, and you're paying $700 for these dumpsters to basically be there for a week. It's a great event, but I want to get something more sustainable. for
We
it.
had 2 in Swiftly, and one, we had to do 2 pools.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah, it was, filled. And I have people like texting me, neighbors texting me, when when's the next glass recycling? Where can I go right now?
Mhm.
Get rid of the white books.
Somebody
yeah.
said it's starting to get embarrassing. So, well, I think on my council, though, I have to say, it's like pulling teeth to get them to agree and pay for this.
Yeah.
So I need to make this a sweet deal for my council, and then, but I am totally in favor of this. I think it's just a total no-brainer. Also, one other thought, PRC was providing some, not maintenance of the site, but some oversight of the site, where they would stop in once a week during the week to just make sure that there wasn't broken glass around it. So I would be interested in knowing if a PRC rep would be visiting our site ever.
That would be part of the proposal, right? The
Yeah,
fees related
could
to
we
that.
get somebody to just visit it from PRC?
So the one thing, there's actually a camera inside each one of these dumpsters. That's how they observe it, make sure it doesn't get overfilled. So I think that might be part of it, but I mean, depending on where it is,
An
I'm not-
in-person visit once a week.
I
It
wasn't-
doesn't, I guess, survey the entire site, so they must have someone drive.
That was my understanding.
And I would
of
take,
What was happening in Swiftly.
I would love to take some responsibility to visit that and just observe it too. That's not a big deal. You know, that's it's part of my job driving out here. I would do that myself too, so.
I think the idea is if we get a proposal, it looks like I have our budget meeting starting October, that makes it easier.
Gives you time to research.
Susan also sent me a map of sites that were looked at for this.
Yeah, I think there was a little bit of research done into that, so I can always pull those records up.
Swiftly was not part of that because Swiftly was not in the clock when that was done, so Swiftly could be included in further research.
That map is pretty generalized. It was just large lots owned by municipalities that were in here. So like they looked way park as a place where you would put a glass dumpster.
Well, there we go. I think we found.
Sound the site.
And growth as well. I mean, we have our glass dumpster and it's about 3 tons a month and it's $525. So my guess is that neighboring municipalities may be bringing their large bottles and put it in. Which for some reason, you know, they sort the glass really well. They don't sort anything else very well.
That's the thing, like, they do
Yeah.
that as well.
One full 3 tons in the dumpster.
Oh,
So in a
1
month-
tons.
In a month, we collect about 3 or 3.5 tons, and that red box is full. So,
So,
John, I've never visited your site, but I know Franklin Park recycles cardboard and glass both on it. And there's this right behind the municipal building.
Our cardboard one might as well be trash. It goes straight to- It goes straight to-
Theirs
Put
is-
styrofoam in it, they put garbage in there, and it's just. But we're not manned where we are, it's down in the.
Neither
shelter.
Franklin Park, but they got so many cameras up and they tell you, you're being recorded. And anytime I've gone to their cardboard one, that's truly all I see, because it just has a slip.
Yeah.
And they got 4 dumpsters side by side with the glass in the back. So theirs is very well maintained for where it's at, I think, and it's just, I haven't had the chance to.
You guys have newspaper, don't you, down below by your?
Yeah, we're one of the few still, that company's such a good deal with it. They don't pick it up for a while and all of a sudden they pick it up every day, you know, might pick it up and it's all over your parking lot. But there is a lot beside our DPW garage, it's privately owned, like people reach out. And that way you're literally right off 65, it's not,
I was thinking that's a good location.
yeah, but we don't, the borough doesn't own that flat lot, there's a weird line through there. So we might be able to reach, the property owners actually business across the creek. So might be able to reach an agreement with them as PR for them, get some recognition.
yeah, definitely, and these are the details to work on for sure.
Is glass just never gonna be curbside, picked up
Well,
curbside ever?
it's a fluctuating market. I mean, I was talking to Michelle Nestor today. She wrote our garbage contract specs. She was saying that she's already hearing rumblings that, you know, the market in glass is starting to turn around. I mean, who knows? It's just one person's voice, but, you know, everything fluctuates. Cardboard right now I know is the most profitable item that they can recycle as long as it's clean. I'm sure that wasn't the case 10 years ago.
Or what, that's
Well, no,
not-
the contract doesn't have glass in it at all. Specifications don't,
Why-
it's not a recycling contract.
they
I
just
talked
wouldn't-
to Doug
they
Vogel.
just wouldn't.
Well, Vogel didn't even come to mandatory bid.
Vogel doesn't want to do the whole COG because there's one neighborhood that they don't want to service. But when you say that no one picks up glass, you're talking specifically about waste management, not
public, no. It's pretty widespread.
And most of the the waste management site over on Neville, so even if
Even
the
if they-
public or anybody
Yeah,
else.
the issue is
they're
they're
not-
taking it, but it's getting smashed and running cardboard. The sorting machine is still the same sorting
Yeah.
machine. So the problem is that we want to put glass in recycling bins and feel good about it. The problem is when it contaminates the other stuff, we're just wasting our time.
Yeah.
If you want to do it right, you have to separate.
Yeah.
So Patrick, I guess, yeah, I mean, we're interested in seeing a proposal even before next budget cycle.
Not even rough, it's rough, I can figure out that myself, but it looks like we're factoring in population.
And another thing to add to that is, we get reimbursed in the back end. So, the host community applies for the Act 104, Act 101, Section 104 grant. And they're estimating, PRC does, between $2,000 and $4,000 reimbursed from your glass collection. Now, that's a pretty wide range, but it does help the cost a little bit. That's one or 2 months worth of pools for
Is that
basically free.
per, is
So-
that per, that's not per municipality?
No, per the dumpster. So if you have a dumpster like municipality A and it collects, X amount of tons, they're projecting between $2,000 and $4,000 worth of reimbursement through DEP.
So that would be factored into the pricing before we.
It could be, but you remember, it's always a year or two behind with those grants.
You need to pay up front, get reimbursed.
Yeah.
I see.
You can't subtract that to grant.
Gotcha.
Because you don't know what you do.
Yeah,
That was-
exactly.
Awesome.
So yeah, I'll keep you guys posted.
Old business?
So I just wanted to update you guys on my site visits. So some of the sites I've visited and met with the staff, just try to work there 2 or 3 days during the week, couple hours each day. Kilbuck, Edgeworth, Emsworth, Bellevue, Aleppo, and Glen Osborne. So I want to thank everyone who was able to meet with me and do that. So I have most of other towns scheduled up to. Couple just I need to schedule concrete dates between now and let's say September, October. And then our meetings attended, Swiftly Emsworth, will be Bellevue next week. And the majority, we haven't got a chance to visit there for the elected officials yet, but slowly but surely checking one off at a time. I'm just trying to pick days that work for everybody. And that one's the toughest because there's so many meetings that are on the same day and just has to work out. So
Are you getting good feedback from the places you go as far as what we could do or?
I don't want to speak for myself. All one of the visits I made too, I got a good chance to.
It was a good chance to sit down and just talk. Since I hadn't met him in person until that point, so it was a good chance just to sit and meet him and see what he's looking for. And obviously, he's gonna work more with Kathy, our secretary, than me or anybody else. So it's always good to have that lady to make a transition.
Yeah, I think it's been great so far. So looking forward to finishing up these visits and getting to see everybody and meet you. So keep an eye out for emails and we'll go ahead and keep that up.
Great, thank you.
Last thing is just in your packets, you guys got a CDBG status report. This is from oldest to newest, everything, just a brief sentence or two updating where we're at. I'm not going to go line item by line item. I'm sure you guys don't want to hear me do that. But it's in the packet. If you guys have any questions at all, please feel free to ask. And just again, I'm going to highlight, the next round of grants are coming up. So I want to be able to get, an application from everybody, right? Even if you don't get something this year, we get you queued up for the next year or the year after that.
We don't have the deadline for when they're due.
It's probably September, but we're going to be starting that soon.
Is that the preliminary?
Yes.
The pre-application.
And we have a template, what that looks like. What needs to be collected for that?
Yeah, I could get you one from last year. I don't have one on the county website yet.
Yeah.
And
You can split where I can find it.
yeah. And I'll send you everything from last year, and I'll send you the Google Drive document Susan made that you guys can fill out on Google and then get sent to me, and then we fill out the PDF yourself. So I'll just send you everything from last year that we have an idea. Yeah, I'm really excited to see what we can get. I want to get everyone involved. I know that, it's tend to be the same 5 or 6 towns, and I want to get the other 7 or 8 involved too. So
I'm not very familiar with city engineering or what to go to, so we should just be talking with them. or
Yeah,
something.
definitely.
Yeah.
And the nice thing is with certain projects like demolition or with ADA compliance, there's no income restriction, right? So anyone, any town can apply. The minimum is $20,000 per project, but you see all these sidewalk projects, the little yellow bump ups for ramps for wheelchairs and accessibility. Those are pretty common. Municipal buildings that might be a little older, the entrance, ramps and elevators, all these things are eligible. So I want to make sure that everyone's aware of that, and we start to get some applications in from towns that might not have experience doing that, so get everyone involved.
Anything else, Patrick, before?
That's all I have.
Well, let's go to concerns by the delegates. So is it Glenn Osborne who's on this?
Yeah,
Um,
Rob's on the call for Ben Osborne.
Bob, do you have anything to report back to the members?
No, nothing to report back. I did have a question, though, if we could get back for just a real quick second to the glass recycling. How do I go about explaining to Glen Osborne Council how Glen Osborne residents can participate in that recycling effort? We really do not have a suitable location. As you know, Glen Osborne is, if I'm going to say 95% residential, and we really don't have a place we can host that. And I want to be able to explain to council how Glen Osborne, or what we have to do in order to ensure that residents can take their recycling, glass recycling, to a local location.
Yeah, Bob, I'd be happy to talk with you about that and get something set up. Right off the bat, I mean, we do have 5 more of the PRC traveling glass recycle site visits. So
right, yeah, we're fine with that. We're fine with that. It's just when that stops, we may have a difficulty because Glen Osborne is so small. It's only 600 residents and no place to put a site.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we're going to be trying to hash out in the next few months. Hopefully, is
all right.
Facility somewhere, and that way everybody can participate, and you guys can use that.
So I guess the point here, Bob, is that it's not because it's not in your municipality that you cannot go to another one to deposit your recycling. So you could have come, you could have come to any of the other municipality, and what we're talking about for the future is more of a permanent site inside the COG where anybody could go.
Would there be a cost involved? I know they're going to ask that question.
Yeah, that's what the proposal will.
Yeah, and that's what we're going to try to figure out and hand out.
Okay. All right, I'm catching up here. It's a little bit hard on Zoom to figure it all out. Thanks.
All right. Yep. Oh. Yeah.
Yeah, I have 2 things. One is to revisit the ArcGIS licenses. I've been advising for over a year now that the $500 like ESRI license does everything that we need for the maps we're using. And you know, in Patrick's final interview, he basically stated the same thing I've been saying for over a year.
Which is, just to be clear,
which is that the $500 license does everything that he showed in his demo, and everything that we've been doing in our maps. That has survey 1, 2, 3, and the programs that Map Curator is using to make the maps. The other thing is we only need 1 license, and I still don't understand why we're paying a $500 a year or a month fee to a consultant when we've only produced about 4 maps the entire time I've been here. I mean, it's baffling to me. We're blowing $15,000 to $20,000 a year on this and getting nothing. And meanwhile, we're talking about how we don't have money to have an office or to pay our bills, and that we need to have CDBG funding so that so that we can apply to have that pay half of our manager salary. And I don't understand why there's all this money pinching and talking about municipalities not pulling their own weight when we're spending this money frivolously. That's completely unnecessary.
So there's 12 things you talked about. So first of all, Patrick, what do you know about the ArcGIS stuff?
Yeah.
I have questions about that too, and what they're licensed for or not. So that's in the crux of the issue for that.
Yeah. So I'd be happy to talk about that. So I think there is some room for some tightening and some tweaking for what we currently did. We bought 10 licenses this year, and it's sort of been the same 10 that we've had for 4 or 5 years now. So 6 of those licenses are individual municipalities. So Edgeworth has one, Bellevue has one, Berkeley Heights has one, Aleppo has one, Kilbuck has one. I forget. There's one more. But the COG has 4 itself, right? And that might be a room to look at and say, do we really need 4? Probably not. But what did they use it in the past for? One is dedicated just to the Route 65 study, right? Does it need to be dedicated? No, that's something we can look into for sure. One was for interns. They've had 3 or 4 different interns in the COG here. Again, way before me, but that was the intern's license. There's one for Matt. There's one for the administrator. So is there room to tighten up our belts for that? For sure. And that's what I'm looking into now. There's some opportunities, I think, that I'm going to be looking into the next few months to see if we can apply for reduced cost licensing, and that's going to be passed right on to you guys too. I've only been here for about 6 weeks, so these are all things I'm looking into.
What
for sure.
Susan told me in the past is like we needed 1 per municipality, and you can only buy them in chunks of 5. So if we had 6 municipalities, we had to be bumped up to 10. And unfortunately, you're saying maybe that's not the case. I mean, we should look at this.
Yeah.
But we are paying 500, and this is because of the way that the software license is set up. So we can't get one and have everybody work off the same $500 license.
We're paying $2,800 a license.
A license, you know.
So
Bellevue's line item for our GIS license is $2,800.
So $2,000 was just sent to the COG, and that was sent in October. So it's going to cover your GIS, RGS license, and that's also with your agreement, Bellevue's agreement. This is again way before me. Set up with Matt Mercurio. That covers him for 12 block hours for whatever you guys wanted to do. Build a map for this, build a map for that. It's not set in stone. It's really up to you guys. So I can't determine how you guys use it, but that's what it's for. However you guys choose to use that's up to you. Again, now Matt charges the COG $500 as a retainer a month. That's for me to use Matt how I want to use Matt, right? I've been working with him to do exactly what I said in the interview, to build this universal GIS zoning map, right? So you type in an address anywhere in the COG, it tells you which municipality you're in, what zoning district you're in, it links up the zoning code, so you can one-stop shop right there. So again, that's our license with Matt. We're paying him for that, and I hope to use him quite a bit. Again,
So
it's only been here for 2 months.
Again, to any of the other, that's another Bellevue specific thing, I feel, because, you know, Bellevue doesn't have to be participating in the GIS, and Killbot pays for that service through the COG, but we don't have to. Like, if we wanted to save that 500 or whatever it is, then we would just decide not to.
Yeah, we don't.
Like Leetsdale, they don't get sent the bill. I mean, that's something that we debate internally with my board, and said, I think we need it, and I made the case
You know,
for it.
like we say license, that's a seat, you know, so we want Ellen to be able to log in when she wants to change data on catch basins and street signs. I don't want to have one COG license where I'm gonna have to call Patrick and say, Patrick, time to log me in and update my street signs. So we like having our own license.
And how is it $500 per month,
$500 a week.
per year?
If you pay extra, you can contract with Matt Mercurio to give you support. So if you don't have a staff that knows how to do GIS,
Yeah, because I
or I
don't
think
think.
12 or 1,500 a year, he gives you a certain number of hours.
John, you're not paying for support.
We're not right now. We talked about it. So we, Patrick and I met with Matt on Zoom to talk about bringing them in, because I just used to have Lennon Smith help me if I needed,
Uh-huh,
and they were charging $90 an hour. So I
Right.
just use them hourly as needed, until we had a big project this last year, and it was about $3,500 for them to fix what I needed to fix. So trying to talk to Matt about it. I don't really understand how I want to talk to him again. You know, so I think that would be beneficial, but we kind of didn't come to an answer there. He said he could quote us per project we wanted done, which would be nice too, so.
And you mentioned the sign inventory map. Is that the map we're talking about?
That's one of the ones we use it for. Yeah, we use it for a lot of different things.
Hey, did you know that I created that project?
But in Edgeworth, I don't know, we have all our signs coordinated through there, things installed, done through us. So thanks for that.
You even have your trees mapped.
We have all the trees mapped, houses that have recycling cans and don't have recycling cans, every street sign in the borough.
Well,
All the storm sewers.
I would recommend you look into the better way to do the pricing. Because, I mean, I think you were the one that made the comment about municipalities paying their own weight. And that's where it seems ridiculous to me that we're spending $15,000 to $20,000 on our GIS licenses to get 3 or 4 maps in 2 years. And then we're talking about how.
So then,
I think we need to hear, be more specific. Here's throwing things out. We're saying it's $500 a seat, so we can't be spending $15,000 because we don't have that many licenses, right? So we are paying for it. Patrick said he looked at that.
Well, I'm talking about what was in our final line items last year, not Bellevue. I'm talking about the COG's budget. There was one for Matt Mercurio, which we're paying him $5,000 a year. And there's another one for our GIS licenses, and that was over $15,000.
Again, I think you need to look at the other side, the income, and who pays for that part of the expenditure. Right, so they come, the funding comes specifically for different municipalities based on.
I think I understand each municipality is paying $2,800 for
Yeah.
the license.
So
I
that's
mean,
where
I've been arguing with Susan for over a year.
Susan's on here.
And I've told her, and she said, the reason we need a $2,800 license is A, B, and C.
Okay. I mean,
So
what was A, B, and C? It was specifically for Bellevue, I assume.
it was, no, each municipality in the COG.
Yeah, I pay 500 a year, so.
We don't pay a thing.
But you don't have it.
You don't have it.
We
So
don't
that's the
have
beauty
it.
of it, is you pay it if you use it. Now, we are all collectively 14, 15 of us paying to have him have
I
500 a
understand.
month to support, which is great. Because that has to be maintained if we're gonna do this as a database. So that we are jointly sharing. But the 500 per license is a municipal decision to participate or not.
So the 2,300 then is for support.
So if
and then we
we're,
need to
if each municipality is doing this, why have the COG? Why not just buy your own RGIS license? And then have, hire Matt Mercurio, whatever you want.
Go for
We
it.
do that, yeah.
Selfishly, I like having other people's maps and sharing mine. Anybody can start a street tree inventory based on what we did. So if Swiftly wanted to put a street tree inventory, and we already have the base map. So if you're saying you started the sign inventory, we were able to benefit from you sharing that with the COG. I think it's a great project.
And I would assume that Matt
If
is
we had our
charging
own, we're
less
not gonna be able to share those maps. It's not gonna.
because we're bringing clients to Matt. Like Edgeworth could be a potential client for Matt. He's going to charge the COG members probably a significant amount less than he would the private person walking up off the street and saying, hey, building this map. But again, it's all up to you guys. However you want to use that.
The second item I have is a streetscape report. Are you able to share the Word document?
Joe.
Patrick, do you know what line item in the budget the GIS is under the data processing?
Yeah,
Okay, so the data processing line item 17,000, that's not just.
not just GIS, Insightly, everything, my
That's
hours.
why we're maybe confusing 17,000 a year in the budget for GIS, which is for more things other than GIS.
Yeah, it's just one of the items. A lot of that's all directly tied into CDVG too, so we actually can get a lot of that written off. In the
So what
end,
is the document you're sharing now?
Anthony sent an email about the streetscape project, and he requested that I
Just
pull it up.
out those doors. Right.
Save it here. All right, take it away.
So
Maybe zoom in.
the Word document just has several images. So the first one is, and most of these are from the original applications. The first one shows the ask for the phase one, which is $200,000. And there was, originally there was gonna be two phases. The budget for the entire project was $500,000 to give it some money. The second image shows the original budget for the engineering, which was $40,000, and we greatly exceeded that. This third image, where it says scope of work, talks about what the original phases were supposed to be. There was supposed to be a phase one and a phase two. each of them extending through the whole length of the project, installing different features.
So
The
to me,
next,
that's about it. What's the big picture message that we can take from all this data?
I'm gonna go ahead and go through each slide. The next image shows the original estimated completion date, which is April 1st, 2013. So this project is now 8 years past schedule. The next slide shows the bids we received. And Brad Hazelwood, the person who received the design, who was selected, was the highest bid. So technically, he shouldn't have been selected in the first place.
Who selected him for the Beaver Borough Council?
He's not even the,
Yeah, Bellevue Borough Council.
we need the highest bid.
He's civil and environmental engineer right here.
Okay,
The next slide shows, it just shows phase one was significantly in the budget. And the committee, the ad hoc committee that was created for this, after a lot of arguing and delay, decided that they weren't going to do 2 phases, that they were going to do it block by block and possibly change it as they went. So then the next slide where I circled things in red, this is the cross section of the design, which basically shows bedrock underneath the sidewalk, touching the buildings that are the walls of the storefronts. And you know,
Can you show me on that where bedrock is?
I'm sorry.
Can you show me where bedrock is on that?
I apologize that it's sideways. These are the these are the storefront walls. This is the sidewalk, and underneath, this is a green design. So it's designed to hold water underneath the road so that it doesn't go, it's an MS4 idea. And this is rock, this is aggregate that's put under the sidewalk. It's touching the wall of the storefronts. So what's essentially happening is, for the length of the project so far, water is flooding all the buildings it touches. And we've had one business owner that that's received a substantial insurance settlement because of the water damage done by this problem. And it's going back and forth. You know, that when people argued about this before I was on council, it was dismissed and belittled. And they said there wasn't a water, you know, certain council members said it rains and there's puddles and then they dry up. And that's how this was addressed back then.
so can you talk a little bit more about the settlement? So it was determined that this design caused the flooding?
Right, the designer is denying that, but
What did the settlement decide?
the insurance settlement?
Yeah.
I would rather get the business owner to talk to me directly, because I might have misunderstood. I'm not sure if I thought that she got it from our insurance, but in a conversation this week, she's not sure if she got it from our insurance or the contractor's insurance. So I don't know if there's anyone saying that explicitly that it was caused by the project.
But I guess you're making the connection in this document.
I'm making the connection for a couple reasons. The next link further down there's a link.
I'm not trying to be rude, but what is this COG related? Like, what can I do about this?
Well, one thing that I'm livid about that might be noticeable is our council was finally about to vote for a new designer. And as we discussed briefly, while I was on vacation, the members of the COG met with our management supposedly. And then our DPW manager came to a meeting, which I wasn't at, because it's the 3rd meeting I've missed in 4 years. So he said that if we switch designers, that we'll never get CDBG funding again. And if you look at the link there, the same thing happened in 2017 before I was on council. The council then, the previous council was going to vote to get a new designer, and Susan Hockenberry came came to a meeting and said, if you vote to get a new designer, if you don't have a new designer by next month, you'll lose the CDBG fund.
It's not money. We administer fairly allocated money. We would never make a threat to Bellevue about any of that stuff. We are the intermediate between the county and the contractors.
Okay, well, I need the COG then to tell Ritz Fitzgerald and the Department of Economic Development that they should not be coming to Bellevue meetings and saying we're gonna lose CDBG money if we don't vote a certain way.
You just said that we made the threat. So now you're saying that it's Fitzgerald that made the threat?
Well, supposedly, what our manager, I have it recorded, so I can play it for you. What our DPW manager said was that the COG and two members of Allegheny Economic Development had a phone call with them and said that if we vote to get a new designer, that we'll never get CDBG funding again.
You should tell them to give it to you, right? Yeah. Tell the county to give that to you, right?
Okay, yeah, I'm in the process of talking.
And I just want to clarify again, say it again. So there were three members of the county, myself, and Cindy. Bellevue's manager on this Zoom call. Basically, they asked me right off the get-go, why is this project what is going on? Because as we said, this goes back, I guess, to 2017 and then 2014. And the higher ups that actually cut the checks in the federal government are asking the county questions on why this money's not being spent. They don't care about Brad Hazelwood. They don't care about any of that. They're saying, why haven't you spent our money? And if you don't spend the money,
I'm sure
somebody else will spend the
I'm
money.
sure what they're saying is, we're not giving you another one if you don't finish this one.
One obvious
So
reason
it's
is that
mismanaged. You gotta finish it, yes.
during COVID, it was put on hold.
This is 2017. It literally says 2017.
Are you talking about the first time?
Yes. Why was this like that? COVID wasn't in 2017.
I'll tell you as a local resident who drives through Bellevue pretty regular, I haven't seen any construction up there in 2 years. I mean, you got that one section done, finally got it paved this year. It's been 4 weeks, you still don't have yellow lines down. You got the signs up, no park there, no pavement markings. But nothing's been moving forward. I mean,
So
look
it's
at
been a frustration of Susan, the COG, that things are just taking a long time to get decided and moving. That's basically what we're saying, and the county is saying, hey, guys, we get all this money allocated, you need to move forward.
Okay.
And that's what John is saying.
If Bellevue Council had control over what was going on,
You have full control.
that there's the same group that, like, how much money did you make at the last dinner?
Why are we talking about this? I mean, let's focus on this one thing and then resolve other issues later.
I would like this project to end. I would like the funding to end. I would like
That's
for
up
it
to
to be
you and
done.
your council to decide. We're not
Okay,
gonna
well, that
apply for
that
CDBG.
can't happen. I mean, we're just going in circles now. That can't happen if the COG comes to Bellevue Council and says, if you don't vote a certain way, you're gonna lose, you'll never get CDBG funding again.
Who said that? That quote? Because they never said that. They said it would be much more difficult. Yes. They never said you'll never get funding again. You guys have 2 grants this year. And that's not related to the streetscape.
Right, and this, we're $1.5 million over budget in this project.
You
And
guys,
I can tell you, there's, we have $1.5 million of blighted properties that we could use this funding for instead. And I think it's
We should apply
absurd.
for it.
If you really want
I
to,
feel for you, I wanna fix this for you, but you apply for money, it has to come through a COG, that's what the rules say. You gotta do the project.
and if they don't, then
And if you
what
don't,
else?
you gotta give it back. I mean, what else is there? I don't know what the, it's a shame.
If you don't do A, you can't get B.
And if you don't do it, you get the money back, or I give you more money. That's like my kids. I mean,
All right,
I know it's simplifying it, but I wanna feel for you.
You're all making great points. In a sense, I'm making you aware of the possible legal nightmare that this.
On which front?
What on, I won't talk about it anymore, think about it. You know what I mean? The reason I haven't been talking about this at COG meetings, because you asked me to not talk about Bellevue politics here, and also because it's a legal nightmare.
I'd ask you to not talk about politics here. I don't think that's an accurate portrayal of that.
I'll be truthful, on the outside looking in, your council needs to get moving. This is strictly my personal opinion. You don't make a decision to move forward. I read the paper, I see time after this is put off, this is put off, this wasn't done. Now, sometime, at some point, your council has to get together and vote and do something and move
But do you
forward.
see how frustrating it is then?
Oh, I
spent
fully
an entire
understand.
year pleading with them to get them to vote to put a new designer, because this is a disaster. And we finally get to the point where they're gonna vote, it's like herding cats, and they're finally gonna vote to get a new designer. And then we get threatened that we'll never get CDBG running again. Does that make sense what my
No,
concern
it's your
is?
council. They're not moving forward. And it's not a COG decision. I won't speak for other groups. Our council gets together, we make a vote. We don't take months and months. We wouldn't take a year. I guarantee you wouldn't take
If
a
we,
year.
right there in 2017, Patrick just asked me about it. If we'd hired a new designer, this entire project would be done.
Well, why didn't they hire him?
Because Susan Hockenberry came to the meeting and said that if we hired a new designer, we would lose the funding.
Is that in your minutes somewhere?
Well,
or-
here's
That's what
probably,
the link
I
is.
mean,
The
I'm
link
not
is
gonna
to our
speak-
minute. Click the link.
I'm not gonna speak because I'm just guessing. My logical brain is gonna tell me that you started an application for a project that was approved with either an engineer or designer. Somewhere in that fine print, it says that engineer or designer has to be the one who stamps it at the end. It says this is done to completion the way it's supposed to. You probably can't switch it midway. That's my guess. So if Susan told you you can't switch, there had to be a reason. She's not gonna say you can't switch because I like Brad, whatever. She's gonna say you can't switch because down here in this little signed and dotted area that the COG apparently has to sign for, you probably committed to it.
We have a group called Bonafide Bellevue.
That's fine. I don't care. I don't care. I'm sorry. There has to be more to this than it is. If you're gonna threaten legal action against somebody, you should make sure that 5 out of your 9 members are in agreement with you before you're talking about it also.
Okay.
That's
And they're
fine.
gonna have an.
There's nothing that George can do to help you here.
Or, I'm-
I mean, you get, sure.
Understand your frustration. I mean, I don't think it's, well, it should be directed at the COG. I think it should be directed at council and have vigorous decisions and we'll be there next week to answer any questions from your board about anything that we know, and we're not gonna hide anything. We're gonna put it out on the table. Maybe that 2017, we should talk to
So
Susan
you might have
about.
to ask Susan and say, hey, this is what somebody said you said. What,
Can you give us more?
what's your
context?
recollection? We need more context.
And the
Yeah.
county will, they said they would come and speak to you guys, and answer any questions they want. You know,
Bellevue, our match for this is over $300,000.
It doesn't matter.
If we could have paid $300,000 cash and gotten a contracting company that wasn't incompetent, that wasn't being chosen for political reasons, and the project would have been done in a month.
Okay, I think there's more we could say, but I think we're gonna.
We had goats come to Edgewater.
That's
Did
Goats.
you?
The
They
goats
ate the
came-
hillside.
Poison ivy.
Allegheny Goatscape, and it's a nonprofit. They'll put up a little electric fence. They bring a donkey and 11 goats, and they will eat invasive species like you're not.
My
They came along
goodness, they
down there.
cleared that out
They
like
cleared it out pretty
crazy.
quickly, didn't they? People-
Where'd you have them?
It was along Route 65 near Edgeworth Lane. There's a
Okay.
mound that we built around the storage lot that we have. And the knotweed's hard to get rid of. The public works guys would spend a week and a half, 2 weeks with weed whackers. When goats came through.
It comes like that.
How long did it take?
4 days.
4 days.
So they take a night,
they stayed on time.
No, they stayed the whole time.
It's an issue with our ordinance about having goats.
Do you pay per day, or how did you have to pay for that?
It was $1,200. He came out and gave an assessment based on
Okay,
the size of the area that the goats did, how many days they'd have to stay. So Gavin, the goat man, and somebody whose title is chief goat herder come and they wrangle the goats.
Wow.
The donkey stays there to protect them. It was very interesting.
That's so cool.
Did they put the fence around you?
They put the fence around, they feed them, they come and put the water down, they check on them.
Dawn the donkey herder.
Her name, the donkey, I forget what the donkey's name was. It was a Diamond the donkey.
Who's you protecting the goats from?
Coyotes.
Is that right?
raccoons, and any other predator that might bother.
So they stay there all night too.
They stay there too, yeah.
Okay.
They would
Now-
sleep when they were ready to sleep.
So
They
the
just eat.
donkey will trample them?
The donkey, whatever the donkey does, it goes over and will scare the raccoon away. I mean, she was mean, but she was nice to us when we fed her.
Do they eat the roots or does that not?
They ate all the leaves and they ate most of the stems down. It'll probably grow back eventually, but you know, you have to keep it clear or else it'll end up 6 feet tall in a month.
Mhm.
So it was a neat project. People loved it. So whether or not we do it again, we'll have to talk. You know, we're not sure that it was fiscally responsible. But the people loved it, so we did it. We'll
Yeah.
probably end up doing it again. So besides that, the school, you know, everybody on this half of 79 needs to pay attention to the school project. And then we went up to the
Oh,
tour.
yeah.
Patrick went up to the tour. You know, it's a big deal. There's gonna be a lot of money spent. And there's a lot of different things on what's going on. there. A lot of risk. There's a lot of risk.
We're worried about if they last, and the drainage and the stormwater.
And whoever wasn't able to come to that first tour, they're doing as many tours as we asked them to do. So if you guys are interested in checking it out, it's a really cool site. And you can ask any questions you guys have. I'd be happy to set that up again and we can do that. So.
It's
There needs to be a
Last.
subcommittee for this call to deal with more.
Have
you
you
know,
been there?
Yeah,
I think like
I've got that.
Bellevue and I know with Karen right much.
Did you walk all the way?
Yeah,
down that
yeah,
corner?
Where the view is, the bridge,
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
stunning. It is.
Awesome. Nothing for Kilwack. Need a motion to.
Motion to.
Second.
Okay.
Thank you guys for attending in person. Thank you guys for attending the Zoom. We will see you soon.
Thanks,
Hey,
guys.
thanks a lot, Patrick.
Thank you.
Thanks, Flo.
Nice to meet you too.